being actually. Is there any advice? Obviously 2021 is going to be a bit of a weird year, same as 2020 was a weird year. Is there anything that's changed, and any advice you could give for any current entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs in sort of how to approach the industry of being self-employed and being a business owner?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I mean, even if we take this, first of all, like with digital marketers, I mean, it's obviously very important, stating the obvious, that we need to leverage what has just happened recently, and using similar wording that I've used today, talking about the fact that people have realized they need some kind of online model, pushing on the pain point that if anything like this ever happened again, you wouldn't want to be in a position where you're not generating revenue. But away from that and just looking at entrepreneurship as a whole, I think that a lot of people this year would have done a lot of self-finding. And I think one thing that I learned, which was really difficult when I first started, was I was always very uncomfortable in my own company. I always found it very difficult to be on my own and to be like spending extended periods of time just not with other people. It was incredibly social. And when I first moved out from living with a friend and I was living by myself, working on my business, it was really tough because I then had no one to be venting with. I had no one to kind of bounce back ideas with. And it's just because there's a lot of silence. And I think the one major thing that's happened this year is a lot of people have been forced into that position that they didn't necessarily want to be in, for better or for worse. But it's actually made a lot of people comfortable in their own blood and in their own company. Now that is a massive asset to anybody who wants to get into business, because that's the first step to be able to keep yourself motivated and to be able to get working on something new. And so I think that for anybody from last year, use that as who wasn't confident in themselves, use that as something that they can leverage going forward. It's something that they've really benefited from all of this. Because at the end of the day, like, there are going to be a lot of people who are starting online businesses now. I think there are going to be a lot of more people who are jumping into entrepreneurship. I think a lot of people realize they don't want to be staying in their job. Some people, especially in the UK, I don't know if in Ireland you had furlough, people have been getting used to having their wages paid to them still while sitting on their ass at home. And so there's not a lot of excuse now to not be doing something new because we've had so much time on our hands. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see how many new I'd love to see some stats on how many new companies have established over the last year or so. I'd be surprised if it wasn't so much further ahead than previous years.
Yeah. And I mean, even on the flip of that, though, the amount of businesses we've seen go under, never mind even all the small businesses, the local businesses that wouldn't have been able to sustain through this. Like, you've got like the Arcadia Group, who fell not that long ago. That's the name of it, isn't it? Arcadia Group. Yeah, they fell not that long ago. They've all been bought out. Pretty much all of the brands they own have been bought now, I think. And do you think there's going to be more uptake or more downtick in terms of businesses?
I think that as terrible as it is, and I would never wish those, because it pains me to see so many businesses failing. But I think within that is so much room for growth and so much room for new opportunity, because it's forcing industries which have been stagnant for tens and tens of years to suddenly innovate. Like Arcadia Group are now being bought, like subsections of them being bought by Boohoo.com, who have proven that they can generate incredible amounts of revenue without the overheads of having brick and mortar stores. And so it's going to be amazing to see how they innovate that business and what they change about it. And there's so many lessons to be taken from that. And I think that in all of the businesses that have shut down as an unfortunate result of the pandemic, I think there are lessons to be taken from those industries and areas where people can innovate, because you can learn from all of the companies that have made extra revenue during this time as well. And so I think that opens up for a lot of opportunity and a lot of business models that maybe didn't exist 12 months ago that people can now replicate. There are so many, you only have to look in the news for how many, on the positive side, how many success stories there have been. Like there was a massive thing about food cart trucks and things like that, like and all those business models, just because someone's done it and it's been in the news this year, all of them are now replicable business models that anybody else can take and try and take on their own spin. Just because, like, as I said at the start of this, you don't need to invent the next Uber, Airbnb. You can just take something that someone's already done and just put your own spin on it. And so I think, on a positive note, there are so many new opportunities that have come from all of this in the birth of the businesses that have failed.
Yeah, yeah. And I think a lot more people as well are seeing the sort of line of you're only one bad day away from being poor kind of is real when something like this happens, and that you need to have another revenue stream, or at least a stronger source of revenue. With that, do you invest in anything else, is there any other aspects or business ventures you have that you've kind of branched out into? I know a while ago you had pictures on your Instagram about something about racing. You had like a race car or something with pictures of it. Is there anything you've looked at?
Yeah, I mean, we have, obviously we have our three businesses, but we have about 5 revenue streams. YouTube, obviously, ad revenue is another revenue stream for us. We have sponsorships and we do corporate deals as well. We recently signed an $80,000 deal with a big international car brand to do a little bit of training for their sales team, which is cool. It's like a 5 video in-house training course. Which is amazing. And that opportunity came to us inbound. So we've got lots of streams. We have some people with sponsor content. And so we're constantly looking on ways to diversify and to build partnerships with other companies. But away from that, we are building a wealth portfolio. Recently bought a new house, literally, and this is the first time this is exclusive. It's on this podcast because no one knows about this. So I'm actually going to be moving property, moving into a new house. And so that's going to be at the end of this, well, it's actually going to be at the end of this month, so which is exciting, and that'll be on my channel, no doubt. So I bought a new property. So I'm very conscious about building my wealth portfolio at the moment. I've got a financial advisor I took on last year. We're making sure we're putting all of the money we can into ISAs. We're investing into stocks and shares. I've got a bit of money into cryptocurrency. And I think that one thing that's always been very important to me is to kind of spread myself as wide as I can in many different areas. So if something went to shit, if some regulation came in and meant we can't run the Affluent Academy anymore, which is why we got certification to prevent that ever happening if the industry something happened. But let's say worst case scenario, something happened. We've got 5 other revenue streams that are in place that are already making us over 10K a month profit that we can fall back on, and our lifestyle will never have to be sacrificed because of that. So I think that's really important is once you have one thing set up is try and work out ways that you can build other streams from that. With an agency, it's like referrals. You can build a referral scheme. You can diversify your service delivery. You can build partnerships with other businesses and get inbound leads from them. You don't just need to rely on outbound sales. You can build 5 different agencies that you've worked with, and you can get inbound referrals from them. So if one partnership goes down, you've got another 4 partnerships, and so on and so forth. I think that's really important for anyone who's in business.
So this is kind of on that. It's actually quite a simple question, to be fair. So obviously people in marketing industry, especially what we do, typically get to the point where you have excess money to an extent where you're looking to make these investments. But for a very simple question, how does someone start doing this? How does someone that's came up never having money in their life, and then suddenly, they've built their agency and they have money, and then kind of go, right, but how do I now sustain myself by putting money into investments? How did you start even doing that?
Through seeking advice, to be honest. I think that the worst thing you can do is just try and limit yourself, just try and gamble with your own money. I think, again, the financial advisors, again, we only did that last year. It's the first time we actually considered doing that. I've always been a bit of a cash hoarder in the business, which isn't really great for taxes because we just keep a big lump sum in the business and it's just doing absolutely nothing for me, just dying with inflation. And so I kind of had this realization in the middle of last year, I really need to do something with this. And so I seek that advice. I spoke to somebody else who I knew was already doing incredibly well, much better than I am. And I asked them for their financial advice and they gave me a referral. And so I think that was one thing that we did. But I think with regards to diversifying your revenue streams, I think that's something only really you can do yourself based on the opportunities that are in front of you. I think that you have to get started to be presented with new opportunities. I didn't have 90% of the revenue that we're generating, or not 90% of the revenue, over 50% of the revenue we're generating now as a whole, as a group of companies. I never knew that I would even have that opportunity presented to me before I started my agency. And so it's just getting started with something, and then other opportunities open themselves to you. Like you've started your agency and you've got this podcast, and then naturally as the podcast gets bigger, you'll have sponsorships, you'll have guests that you speak to, and one day you'll speak to a guest who offers you an opportunity because he thinks you're the right person for something else he's working on. And it's just that tumble effect of these opportunities that come to you once you get started with something.